Hi, this is 100 in 100, where we are reviewing 100 VR games in 100 days. Today we're going to be looking at Flight Simulator New York. VR Flight Simulator New York is a fun flight simulation game that allows you to look at New York from all different angles. There's 5 different airports that you can take off from, and the city has graphics and sceneries that are actually pretty impressive when you start playing the game. In our VR Gear game reviews, we like to cover all aspects of a game so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not you're going to try or buy the game. So let's jump in and take a deeper look at VR Flight Simulator New York. VR Flight Simulator New York is available on the Viveport Infinity store as well as the Steam store. We got our copy from Viveport Infinity subscription, and the file size comes in at around 2 gigabytes. It'll take you anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes to download and then install the game. And once it's installed, it'll be easy enough to get up and into the game and see the game menu. The game menu was actually pretty impressive, and there were a lot of different options that allowed you to pick the type of airplane, the airport that you were going to take off from, and even the time of day or night that you would like to fly. In addition to having multiple airports to fly out of, you are also able to pick the terminal that you would like to fly out of, and this adds to the variety that you have in the game, letting you choose a lot of different contexts and scenarios and time of day to fly. Although it doesn't make the flying any more realistic or closer to high-end simulators that a pilot would use for training, this does add a lot of welcome elements to make the game more complex and give you a lot more areas to explore. This game is definitely a simulation game. However, it's not a simulation game that can be used for training. It is a fun game that is used for visualizing the city or seeing it from a new perspective. You'll play this game from the first-person perspective, and you're able to see your hands as they interact with the different controls inside of the cockpit of the airplane. This game is different from other flight simulator games that show up on other game consoles in that you're not able to have a third-person view of the airplane as you're flying it. For theme and story, this game is without a story, but it is clear that the theme of airplanes and airports and viewing the city of New York is very strong in this one. The game developers have done a really good job of capturing things that pilots would care about. The airplanes are Cessna airplanes that airplane hobbyists or people who own their own private plane are likely to have. And so the developer did a lot of work and put a lot of time into creating a game and an experience that is very immersive and a very strong theme around flying a personally owned airplane. The music and sound of this game was really impressive. We thought that it did a really great job of capturing a very realistic environment around the sound. Music is only found in the game menus and as the game introduces itself, but when you're in gameplay, you are exposed to some sound effects that were actually very impressive that enhanced the experience quite a bit. For example, you're able to hear the engine and its performance as you are flying through the air. You're also able to hear the weather as it starts to rain on your airplane. And the interesting thing here is that the rain can be so loud that it overpowers the sounds of the engine. This can be something that helps the pilot know if something has gone wrong, or you need to listen closely to hear the engine over the noise of the weather. So this type of audio experience was really great to be a part of, and the game developers did a really good job with the sound effects in this game. The controls for this game were actually pretty simple, but there's challenges around creating controls for flight simulators because of the need for adding some sort of feedback as you are playing the game. For example, as you're pulling back on the yoke in the airplane, typically in a real simulator or in a real airplane, you would feel some sort of resistance, which would give you some feedback as to how much you should continue to pull, how much force you should apply. But because we are in VR and there aren't any additional external forces that are giving us some input, controlling the plane became very difficult. The only buttons that you can interact with on the controllers that represent some sort of interaction in VR were the grips and the trigger, which allowed you to grab items or hold on to the yoke of the airplane. Otherwise, the buttons and the dials inside of the airplane, you couldn't interact with them no matter how many button combinations we tried. They were there just for show to give you, the player, a sense of presence inside of an airplane. Player movement in this game was very simple. All you do is sit in an airplane and fly. Now, we would recommend, if you're playing this game, do not do it standing up. You should probably find somewhere to sit. And make sure that you set the height of the headset to sitting to make it so you don't feel like you're floating too high above the seat or sitting too low in the airplane, because this can obstruct the view that you have of the city, which we experienced. All we could see was a sea of controls and knobs and dials and a propeller spinning above the windshield and not much of the city. And that's because we sat down halfway through our flight. Had we sat down at the beginning, things might have been different. As far as kinetosis or motion sickness goes, this game reflects how sick you might get in an airplane anyway. So we did get motion sick in this game. We did feel a sense of disorientation as we flew an airplane because we were tilting it and barrel rolls and up and down, but we were still standing or sitting stationary. But as you fly normal airplanes or fly in a normal airplane, you feel these things as well. So perhaps the simulation should get extra points for causing motion sickness when you would actually experience motion sickness when you did that same activity in the real world. For environment immersion, we were really impressed with this game. The game developers went to a lot of effort to include details about airports, details about terminals of those airports, and details about the city that you'll be flying through. They also included details about the airplane so that you had the proper dials in front of you. And although you couldn't interact with them, they were still there to add to the realism and add to the immersion of the game. So we really enjoyed the environment and the immersion here. On top of that was the audio that we heard, the game effects, the sound effects of the airplane and the weather, and the crash landing. Okay, the crash landing wasn't terribly impressive and it wasn't ultra realistic, but everything else about the game was very impressive when it comes to immersion and helping us feel like the environment was believable and one that we would like to stay in for extended periods of time. All right, so let's do the final scorecard for VR Flight Simulator New York. The first one is theme and story. And we are giving this game a 6 out of 10. While there's not a storyline that it follows, the theme is very strong around flight, and the game does a really good job here. So a 6 out of 10 for theme and story. For controls, we're giving this game a 3 out of 10. Some of the deductions here come from limitations of VR, and other ones come from the game developers not taking full advantage of the controls that were available to them. So we are giving this one a 3 out of 10. For music and sound, this game is getting a 7 out of 10, and this largely has to do with the very well done audio while you're in the flight experience. A lot of detail and a lot of time had gone into creating that, and we want to recognize it with a 7 out of 10 score. For player movement in this game, your interaction with the airplane and the way that it responded to your input was pretty well done. There are some limitations to it, and there aren't as many controls that you can take advantage of, but moving inside of the game was very well paired with what you would expect in a flight simulator or in an airplane. So for player movement, we are giving this game a 6 out of 10. For kinetosis or motion sickness, we are giving this game a 6 out of 10. We did get motion sick, but it matched our expectations of being motion sick while flying. So a 6 out of 10 for motion sick. We are giving this game a 9 out of 10 for environment and immersion. And this high score was earned because of the great detail that was included and all the time that was put into creating an audio experience that was very immersive and believable. All right, so the final score for VR Flight Simulator New York is a 6.1 out of 10. This game is $10 on the Steam store, or you can get it as part of your Viveport Infinity subscription, and we think it's well worth that money. We had a great time. There's a lot of different combinations that you can experience while playing this game. So that is VR Flight Simulator New York. This has been 100 in 100, where we are reviewing 100 VR games in 100 days. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on that notification bell so that you can get a notification when we review and release another VR game review tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.